Hello, everyone. My name is Patrycja. I'm one of the directors Castle. It's our first hybrid event, so we're very excited, but also it's the first time we're running it. So fingers crossed everything will go well. Well, let me first introduce Startup Grind to those of you who are tuning in or who are with us for the first time. We are the largest startup ecosystem globally, with 600 chapters across the globe, 125 countries, and around 5 million community of members, basically entrepreneurs in tech. We host thousands of events globally and bring like-minded, diverse individuals together. So we had speakers like Gary Vee, Jessica Livingston from Y Combinator. And if you're looking for a place to connect, to learn, to get inspired, that's the right place. Today's event is part of the Web3 themed event that we run across all the chapters across the globe as a Web3 summit. And we hope that by discussing Web3, we will be able to kind of bring it a bit more closer together to connect Web2 with the Web3, to bridge that gap. One more thing before we start, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors, Seed Legals, who are sponsoring the chapter activity for the next coming months. And I can't recommend them enough. Every time we speak to startups, we hear really good words about the work they're doing. They're supporting startups basically with investment when you're rising on the legal side or when you're hiring your team. They're the best people to talk to. If you're at that stage and you'd like to get connected with them, please let us know. We'll be able to connect you directly with one of their team. Also, we are using a beautiful space of Eagle Labs arranged by Flow. So I'd like to thank Flow Workspace and Eagle Labs for supporting us and for making that event happen today. So with that said, let's get started. I'd like to introduce Nicolas. Nicolas is an early stage investor, crypto investor, writer, and philanthropist. He speaks across the globe. We're very lucky to have him here today. He is part of the founding team at Amazing Blocks, founder and CEO of DAC, and founder and initiator of MetaGameHubDAO. Additionally, he is the co-founder of the Tokenization Working Group and the European Blockchain Association. Quite impressive. And I remember when I first met Nicolas, it was just Amazing Blocks and it was the beginnings of lockdown. So quite a lot has changed since then. He has previously worked with established companies such as Daimler or Allianz Global Investors. Nicolas believes blockchain will disrupt a vast amount of industries and maintains that the features such as decentralization, transparency, or public accessibility can transform the global economy. I personally, it is something that I'm becoming more and more passionate about. So I'm really excited for this conversation today and to hear about the new ventures as well, Nicolas. So let me welcome Nicolas to the stage. Nicolas was supposed to be tuning in from Germany today, flying from the conference in Dubai. Got COVID and is now isolating in Dubai in a hotel, and that might be the internet connection. Nicolas, thank you very much for coming and joining me today. It's great to see you again. We had a bit of a challenge last time when we spoke, so it's really great to see that you could make time and join me today for the conversation about the Web3, the metaverse, and everything that you do.
Yes, awesome. Great to be here. Apologize again also for the inconvenience the last meeting. And yeah, looking forward to today's questions and fostering education on Web3.
Yeah, amazing. All right. Well, I'd like to start with your background. When I first met you, your only project at the very beginning was Amazing Blocks, when you were actually helping companies to tokenize assets and educating them on what you can do within that space. And I remember the very first conversations we had, you were very passionate and very focused on that education part and bringing the concept of blockchain and crypto to the wider community. your LinkedIn tagline even says on a mission to foster decentralization. So that was then. But can you tell me when did it start and what is the driver for you to actually, to be on that mission?
When it comes to fostering decentralization, the core principle behind this is like, that Web3 and especially also then the metaverse with its gamified experiences, can really create equal opportunities, across the globe to anyone that has access to the internet in some sort of way. And, so that's something when, I think it started around 2017, really picking up. I got into crypto 2016, but there was more from the investment or trading side. But then I really, you know, dove deeper into the matters from the technology itself, and that's when I realized, the potential that it can have, right, in regards to, kind of decentralizing the clusters, right, of opportunities. So yeah, that's kind of when it started from my side. And in the beginning, I was of course more focusing on the also the side of diving into the technology itself, and also the experience also from the B2B side, which is also the focus on the tokenization, right, of companies. And then started shifting more heavily onto the data and metaverse side, really, because I see this as one of the core drivers of also that mission. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually what you've done on your journey since then, since Amazing Blocks. It's actually quite a lot. Looking at your LinkedIn, at least, and following. So Amazing Blocks was the first one just before lockdowns, and then you added to your portfolio DAC and the other company, both DAOs. Yes, as far as I know, was the launching of those during the pandemics or just after? Were there any challenges with that? How did it go?
No, so basically DAC is an incubator, right, that we are currently building for DAOs, right? And the Catalyst project, is MetaGameHubDAO, right, where we are basically, the long-term vision is to become the hub, the home base, right, for users when it comes to infrastructure. That's the lands and the metaverses, right, and the applications on top, right, that help the users to intuitively navigate through the space. And the short to medium term, we cover kind of, the entire life cycle as something like a one-stop shop when it comes to metaverse endeavors, because basically we support with the strategy, the investment side through algorithms, right, that we develop for finding the best lands, undervalued lands in the secondary markets, and also having analytical data and heat maps for the lands, right, to identify clusters and stuff like this in these maps. And sorry, my dog. On the other hand, the building part that comes after making these investment decisions, right, and the portfolio management and auditing. So that allows us to really holistically support the entire life cycle of these metaverse journeys, especially also from the branding side, right, and sports, music, and so on. So that's one of the projects where, since we did a decentralized community launch, like a fair launch kind of, um, you know, we had a very seamless, establishment process, right? um and let's say, I think though, when it comes to the future, of course there's going to be more friction, right, when it comes to setting up, because of course also the regulations are getting stricter. And also in Europe, for instance, with the MiCA regulations and everything, regulations on the one hand can be beneficial, but on the other hand, of course, they can, let's say, harm innovation a bit at times. You never know.
Correct.
And therefore, I think, anyone that I'm not a lawyer, right, but anyone that goes into the space and wants to build something, you should always strive for decentralization, but at the same time also have liability protection, right? So that's always kind of a balance that you need to have. And we have a corporate structure, also from the incubation side and everything. So like, of course, if people are interested also, and they can reach out to us, because now from the Amazing Blocks brand, basically, Amazing Blocks will be more niche oriented, right? Because Amazing Blocks is also now part of the incubator, and will be more niche oriented. focusing on helping with establishment, tokenization, lifecycle management of the entity, and also tax side, right? And let's say the other projects are focusing on convergences of data, healthcare, real estate, and so on, with the metaverse at the end of the day.
Yeah, it looks very broad. And then there is the tokenization working group, the European Blockchain Association. Is that also something that you're involved in?
Exactly, we founded over a year ago the tokenization working group at the European Blockchain Association, where it's all about fostering also further education on anything token related, right, within Web3, and they're having different programs and things like this, right, to spread the awareness and build synergies, find connections, so it's kind of like, a think tank in that sense. Exactly.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So it seems like you're actually building different blocks to bring together all the knowledge and everything that the space needs. And it's probably quite a lot of learning for people to do, because that's a very evolving space, which makes you, or the aim is to make you and all those organizations a point of sort of a contact, or the knowledge hub. Okay. So sounds like an exciting journey so far, and a lot has happened. Well, let's look at the industry and talk about that a bit. I mean, our event title was the exponential age and acceleration in that age. How would you define the exponential age, and what's happening right now, and how the tech transforming, the society, shaping that? What do you think the effects are of that, or what they will be? Because obviously we can see quite a lot going on.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very deep question, of course, right? Because there's a lot of aspects involved when it comes to let's say the broader digital age. And I like the phrase by David Orban, the age of, or like, jolting technologies, right? So there's of course different technologies that are merging, and different ecosystems that are converging, and therefore there's going to be a rapid change also, of course, in regards to the environment and how we behave and interact. A lot of repetitive jobs, of course, will become obsolete, and therefore, though, these to earn models, right, within, let's say, the biggest driver of that new, let's say, environment with Web3, right, which includes all encompasses all these metaverse GameFi endeavors. Then basically these to earn models will, for instance, and incentive based models will again, really become relevant. And also other aspects in that journey are that basically, the creators economy, as we often also define it, right, is going to really rise further, forward, because the access and the the intuitiveness, right, of the entire creative journey, and also the go-to-market strategy, it becomes more accessible at the end of the day to the artists. And so therefore there's going to be a lot of changes, right, with this digital age. Everything will be affected, and it just depends kind of how do we structure it, because there's kind of two sides, right? Also, either it's going to be a continuation also of Web2 when it comes to the decentralized classes, right, of control, also when it comes to data and things like this, or we choose a path, right, where it goes toward decentralization and democratization, for instance, also of data and these type of assets, right, which is a core underlying pillar, right, because it's all about data at the end of the day, the ocean of data, to reference Ocean Protocol, right? Basically, so that's going to be also a key part when it comes to that next step. Also, when it comes with the technologies, because once we better connect also the real world with the digital world, of course, there's going to be even more data available that can then be leveraged, right, for anything at the end of the day. So that's also a key component within that entire push that I see that people should definitely focus on. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel, because obviously you're working in that space, so you probably work with people that are quite familiar or exploring this the space. Maybe I'm more detached, so I see a lot of people still very kind of, well, they're on a learning journey, and obviously with on one side we've got something that is really accelerating towards one direction, and something more kind of like stagnant as it was. It will create that gap. Do you feel that there is still a lot to learn for the organizations when you or the companies and people, and it's because I feel it's still early stage, but you might have a different impression.
I mean, here it depends, whether we see it from the perspective of, it generally depends from which perspective we look at it, because either we look at it from the perspective of users or builders, right? So from the user side, it's just a matter of time till, everything within Web3, especially through the metaverse, which we are seeing right now, which is far more tangible, to all of these brands, because I'm speaking with a lot of brands, right, in sports and music and other industries right now. And basically, when it comes to anything else before in crypto, right, it was always a bit, okay, well, how can I leverage this? But with metaverse, like, it's quite easy having these neighborhoods of different clubs and associations and artists and things like this, right, in different metaverses, and there's a good entry point when it comes to the gap. And then anyone that's interested in these measures is more like a user, right? And then you're looking at the perspective of the user, where it's just a matter of time till we can intuitively use it without having to understand it. And that's also when we have the mainstream adoption, right? Because right now it's about investing in building still, also in the metaverse, right? And therefore it's not yet about using that much, but it will come. And from the building part, yes, you are always, if you want to build, you have to understand it, right? So that gap is there, of course, but there's so many builders now these days. Of course, there's a lot that also still, like, understanding everyone. No one can know everything in this space because there's so many rabbit holes. But
Yeah.
basically, of course, here we need to. I think what we really need is some sort of really Web3 style knowledge hub, right? Not like centralized players in Web3 that are potentially influenced by certain parties, just pushing that content, but more like a real true Web3 uh, aggregation of, knowledge in the space. And I think that could be very beneficial. And there's a lot of players that are working on this, right? It just takes time because it's, of course, very ambitious goals. Yeah, so that's kind of, I think, where that needs to happen. And of course, anyone that is building in Web3, needs to build bridges, but that's happening. It takes time, these, also the sales life cycles and the life cycles generally within large players that are entering a space, of course, takes some time, couple months and so on. So it's slow processes, but it's getting there, and once there is more intuitive tools, right, then the adoption will, of course, also on par with this accelerate, very much. And then people will leverage it without even knowing it again, right? And then that's when we have the true adoption. And
Yeah. Well, thank you. Do you think there are a lot of gray areas within that space? Because obviously it's evolving, a lot is developing, especially like when you look at DAOs or, I don't know, maybe tokenization. Are there still a lot of gray areas where there might be some concerns of how will that develop or where it will go?
When it comes to the gray areas in general, right, that there's, of course, a lot still in the space from different angles. I think, that as a builder, right, and that's in Web3, it's all about, kind of also disrupting, right, barriers and testing out new waters, because like, people compare crypto and Web3 sometimes to like a Wild West. And of course it's not 100% like this, but it's still here and there is true, right? People get hacked, things like this, so there needs to, of course, also be some protection, but I think that generally all these aspects can be at some point, in the best case, be autonomous processes, that are defined by code, that is neutral and maybe governed in a decentralized fashion, right, by the community.
Yeah.
So that's how I envision it for the future. Yeah, and I think at some point, that entire space is also something I've been, thinking about lately, and also speaking with some guys, right, like Bruce from Ocean, the founder, and so on, is like that we'll also have like various sub identities that we already have, right, on different platforms and within web, that will become even more sovereign AI-based sub-identities of ourselves that focus on niches, right, within the environment. For instance, like I spoke with a professor about this too, that there's these on-chain brains, so to say, which is like an AI agent that can train then other bots, at the end of the day, that can be
Yeah.
characters like these profile pictures and so on. And then this can become like different sub-identities of ourselves within the different metaverses, right? So there's a lot of crazy things happening
Wow.
that for the future, and it will be here more earlier than many will probably anticipate it. Yeah, I think.
Wow, that sounds very exciting. At the same time, maybe a bit scary. So how long do you think it's, because you said that it might be shorter time than many anticipate? How long do you think it will take for the Web3 to be kind of widespread and kind of a normal thing? Like with the internet at the beginning, we were sort of somewhere very skeptical, and now it's just what it is. What do you think? How long time do we need that for the Web3 to be widely used by everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, we already have experienced the first waves of adoption, and yeah, really the full scope will happen probably over the coming 2 to 5 years, I think.
Mm.
But it's hard to give very time estimates because even from the development side, we see it with all the updates, for instance, from Ethereum, and I can totally relate to there never being like a fully 100% fixed date, because it's dependent on many factors, right? The technology is being built, right, and people are building. Another thing is also the adoption happening from an outbound strategy, right? That takes time. Market cycles are very much relevant for this as well. And right now, it's not looking so well at the moment, of course, right? So it's going to take time, but it's going to be more like a gradual process that is then pushed, by specific niche applications that have a large impact, that then drives people further to this space, right? And at some point, it's going to be a very seamless, all-encompassing experience. But till we have this, it takes maybe even longer than 2 to 5 years. Like it's such a huge change, right? So therefore, each year, I feel like there's going to be a lot of changes, right? If you look back at what actually happened there. Yeah.
Mm. Well, 2 to 5 years is actually not a long time. when, when we think of like, yes, that's really accelerating. I think about DAOs. A lot of people feel, I mean, I'm quite excited about DAOs. Quite a lot resonates with me, with the centralized ownership, the contribution, and impacting the projects as you work on them. Could we explore that in more depth? And could you tell me how they different, like decentralized organizations, decentralized sort of companies? What are the differences? And when we look deep down into those.
Yeah, I mean the key component or part here is really the autonomous part, because technically speaking, even a, let's say, yeah, corporation nowadays in Web 2 generally, that has decentralized ownership, quote unquote, when it comes to shareholders, this is an organization, right? So therefore, I would, let's say, pick that aspect, right, of a DAO that as the core differentiation, where we have an autonomous ecosystem that is not, at least not fully, governed by, humans, making decisions. But
Yeah.
actually, if you look at the current status of DAOs, then we're not there yet, right? So that also again shows how early we are, because
All right.
the key aspect really is, or for the long run, that we have that autonomous ecosystem, right? That's fully fluent. Um, but right now it's more like on-chain governance that defines manual processes, right? And that connection between that on-chain governance, because at the end of the day it is also a decentralized organization, right, and these autonomous processes, is a key part that still needs to be much enhanced, right? We have so many DAO tools that are being built out there, and that's again on the one hand good, of course, but on the other hand, again, we have then a lot of friction between the platforms, because yeah, DAOs should be as connected as possible, and kind of also this collaboration between DAOs and things like this. That these are all avenues that still have to be explored and standardized. So DAOs is really something that right now one can say that, like the Ethereum blockchain, maybe with the nodes, and Bitcoin blockchain, that it could be like a true DAO, and from the other side, it will be these digital organizations, and maybe even really larger communities, such as like digital states. So in that sense, that will focus on different niches, at the end of the day, and therefore creating value and also consuming value in that sense, right? And yeah, like they fully operate on chain, so therefore all the processes in the best case are fully managed by code, even if it's decisions, right, that are made, of course, by the community members,
Yeah.
that is then, so to say, processed with the code, um, which can make it in the long run very, very efficient in comparison to existing companies. And since we're also moving more toward, let's say, these economies where people are more like, working freelance based and more independent, it's of course, in the best case, there can be also small DAOs, but often it's like larger communities,
Yeah.
and therefore you can participate in various communities and be a bit more independent from single centralized employers, right, at the end of the day. And yeah, so it's still right now more in the conceptual stage and the very early steps. People are always talking about, there's going to be soon a DAO hype, and rise of all DAOs and everything. It's I think it's a more gradual process, but of course there will be key moments in the coming bull runs where DAOs also will probably play a crucial role, when it comes to onboarding and driving these communities. Because if, for instance, major sports clubs become a DAO, I can't say too much, but that's not something that's not possible. Or when these type of things happen, then we're going to have a lot of more adoption and pushes also toward this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people have that inclination to form communities, and it's becoming on the rise. And I think that plus that gig economy and to the willingness to work not necessarily for someone, but more kind of have the more power,
Yeah.
deciding where they work. That might actually be what resonates with a lot of people, and kind of push them towards those organizations. Is there like one typical model, like when you have the contributors within the DAO? Is there one typical model how they are incentivized, or different models? What do you think is the best?
Yeah, I mean, there's of course, also different forms of DAOs, and therefore different
Yeah.
concepts how these DAOs are operating. There's DAOs, that they can be fully algo based. There's DAOs that are partly algo, partly human based. There are DAOs that are fully based on human decisions, right? And in each of these, of course, the incentive structures and the contribution structures are different. So therefore, I think a DAO, gives you on the one hand a lot of room to flexibility, right? And on the other hand, also to still having like a very systematic approach to how the entire ecosystem is operated. Because at the end of the day, it's a new form also of coordination, right? More connected to the code, right? And therefore, we're still, of course, with different models trying out what the best ways there are, right, in industry. um, and some do it with having different tiers, right, from the contribution side. Others do it with bounties, for instance, for specific deliverables. There's different tools also out there, kind of like Web3 Trello boards, right, that are used to then facilitate also the contributions plus the rewards and the governance there. So there's different models in regards to how these structures are operated. And I think depending on how and what the DAO scope is, these different models will be applied. So it's not a phase right now, I would say, where it's about which of these models is going to succeed. It's more about which niche are these models going to cover within the bigger picture of all the different DAOs focusing on different parts, right?
All right.
And industries at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay. And the metaverse. So that's also something you're heavily involved. Can you tell me more about the projects that you're currently working on, or that are on the rise, and what happens there in that space? Because
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go
no,
ahead.
go on, go on.
Yeah. No, because like when it comes to the metaverse, I think generally the best approach is to be as diversified as possible, and that's why I also prefer the term right now, at least, to make it more feasible for people. Open metaverse, because there's not going to be one metaverse in that sense. Like, is it decentralized or sandbox? No, it's more about how do these ecosystems complement each other within the open metaverse as the infrastructure levels. So that's one of the key parts when it comes to the metaverse. And the metaverse is really where all these innovations that we're talking about within Web3, decentralization, crypto economy, the token economy, and so on, so to say, where they become mainstream is the metaverse, because that's where it all comes together, right? There you have these exhilarating virtual experiences while engaging with the sophisticated blockchain based tools without having to understand it, right? Because it's a fully gamified experience that basically are engaging with. So that means that even at some point, very old generations and people at the end of the day can even interact with DeFi protocols, because maybe the experience of borrowing from a DeFi protocol is how you walk into a bank, and are assisted by bots, that support you throughout the process. And that's also actually one thing that we are like similar experiences doing on a project. I cannot chat too much yet about, but it's basically DeFi metaverse. So basically there's a lot of opportunities in the metaverse, where all these innovations that people are talking about are coming together, right? Because it's, I think, as I said in the beginning, right, for these brands, it's much more tangible, to they now see infrastructure that can be built, that can be somehow leveraged. And what happens in the background, which is the entire token economy, the blockchain part, that's for the builders, right? But the user has just a very seamless experience, in the best case, and once we have the true adoption of this entire ecosystem. And what, for me personally, the way that I see it is, since, so to say, that vision and mission, so to say, for decentralization, needs to happen then through the metaverse. And that's why it's so crucial to have also a decentralized open metaverse. um, and they're basically building infrastructure and applications, is really what I'm focusing on with the different projects that I'm involved in, to support the journey from different perspectives, right? For users from the B2C and B2B side, right? So that's of course quite broad. But for instance, some of the things we're building is valuation tools, right, for lands. heat maps, and things like this, like as I mentioned at the beginning, and other tools to have a convergence between real estate, infrastructure projects, in the traditional world, so to say, and having any interactions within the metaverse economy also for these projects and things like this. So there's different, let's say, avenues, because it's something that's relevant for anybody, entering the space. And that's where I also see the core power of the metaverse and why it's so relevant. In a way, we've already lived in the metaverse, right? Even this virtual conversation can be seen as a metaverse in a way, or as a part of the metaverse presence that we have. The only thing that's missing right now is the seamless experiences and the monetization of assets, digital assets, right? Which is at the end of the day the crypto economy and the tangibility of these assets, right? And that's kind of that layer that's put on top, and the fungibility then, in that sense. So yeah, that's what I'm really excited about, and to build in this space and support players entering that as well, and through education and also building, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, engaging with startups very often, I hear, I mean, do not necessarily in the crypto space or Web3 space, but very often they have that appetite like, oh, well, let's do something in that space, and they're quite interested in exploring. Do you think there is a special or particular industries that could particularly benefit in metaverse? Obviously, you mentioned esports, games, brands obviously are exploring the space, but is there anything else as well that could pick up quite quickly, or there is that opportunity bigger than the others?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think, let's say just rationally, right now, what's having the biggest, let's say, yeah, adoption curve is actually gambling, for instance, right? So
Oh,
decentral games, is very successful when it comes to the users and so on in Decentraland, for instance, right? So that's like an industry that is, I mean, there's a lot of uh, poker guys, for instance, in crypto. If you go to these events and so on that have a background in poker and stuff like this, so there's already a convergence, and that's something that right now has the biggest driver, or one of the biggest drivers, at least, let's say, when it comes to actual utilization of the ecosystem. And let's say sustainable business models even that can be created there. On the other hand, basically, let's say, I think what the best opportunities, for entering there is I think music and sports are two key industries, right, that can benefit from it, first of all, heavily. Just from the musician's perspective, for instance, to become much more independent from centralized players like labels and so on, and just publishing your art and having most of the royalties and everything. And similar to sports players and stuff like this. So there's a huge for on the one hand benefit for the creators, basically, or the people involved in these two industries. And on the other hand, there's also a huge community, right, behind that, when these influential individuals, for instance, also push in their fan base certain things, then this can really have a huge impact in regards to adoption, in the metaverse, for instance. So I would say gambling is right now one of the, let's say, maybe people didn't think about it too much, the unexpected winners right now. But I think music and sports are going to be huge drivers.
follower.
And at the end of the day, though, also for education, like having this type of metaverse style education in different metaverses. That's what we're working on, for instance, as well, with some universities, having healthcare related aspects in the metaverse, e-commerce. These are all industries that are definitely, let's say, yeah, finding a good sweet spot in that industry and can benefit heavily. And I probably forgot a lot, right? Data is, of course, a key driver as well, where data can even become, let's say, something like a universal basic income in a way, at least. Because if we monetize data ourselves that we produce, right? And once we have that data sovereignty, then we can constantly generate revenue based on the data that we are producing. I don't think that it will happen that we stop producing data, so to say, and the data will just be anonymous, right? I think that there will be some levels of course, staying anonymous in ways, right? Through zero knowledge proof and other innovations within the blockchain world. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be data monetization, right? But we just have to make sure that it comes from us ourselves producing this data. And so, yeah, these are just some of the key players, I think, are industries that definitely will benefit from that space.
Thank you. I'm very surprised to hear about poker, and thinking of your plans ahead. What lies ahead?
You mean from the industry or personally, or?
Your projects you're working on, and if we have a meeting in a year, where do you see yourself and your companies?
Yeah, so basically, first of all, of course, the I see it right now. There's quite some changes again happening in the industry, with all the fears of recession, with the markets dropping. I think though it's always good times to also weed out a bit you know the quick money grabs, right? And the players that are not sustainably building. There's a lot of for instance, shotgun investors, VCs, right, in the space. For instance, while VCs are relevant, this is something that really needs to be addressed, right? There's a lot of VCs in this industry that basically are just investing left and right, but with all these high evaluations, they didn't really care about what they're investing in. They just care about, oh, am I getting in early so I can exit quickly? I think the coming months, and already what happened, maybe helped a bit. Also, again here, put a break to these type of things, and therefore it's more about building sustainably. And this is, for instance, to us, of course, especially relevant because we consider ourselves as these type of players, right, that are building for the long run. And therefore I think there's going to be a huge growth over the coming months from our side, when it comes to very impactful partnerships and deals that will put us in a yeah, that will help us scale, right? And I don't know where exactly everything will be in 1 year. We work in sprints, right? So I mean, we of course have project boards and roadmaps, but I think generally there's a common understanding that having too many roadmaps in tech also doesn't make sense. But we're definitely going to have, for instance, the home base deployed and everything for aggregating and providing infrastructure to users in the metaverse, to really have also that identity level in place for the metaverse, right? So there's going to be a lot of different tools from that side, and also IP and brands, right, that we're working with. And I'm pretty excited, right? And also growing, of course, a team from the education side in collaboration with universities and other exciting players in the industry. And so I'm pretty confident for what's to come. And I think right now is a good opportunity for everyone also that was maybe a bit shocked by some of the valuations, right? So I don't think it's a bad time also what's happening now in the markets. And it's the opportunities are bigger than ever, I think, for the space. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what's coming.
Great. No, it sounds exciting. I asked about the year. Normally, I would ask like what's in 5 years if it's a more traditional business, but I know that in that space, it's slightly different. Well, if anyone would like to reach out to you and find out more, or have a project that they'd like to explore, to you, how they can do it?
Yeah, so basically, yeah, on Twitter, for instance, is one possibility, at the nicholasweber.eth, or on yeah, LinkedIn is another option. Yeah, these I think are the two best ways to get in contact with me, or of course contacting the teams of the different projects, right, or things like this. Yeah. Mhm.
all the best with the project. So I hope that when we speak in a year to come, in a year or so, there'll be a lot of exciting news to share. Thank you very much. That was very inspiring and quite a lot there.
Thank you.